Hello everyone, good morning and welcome to our webinar session this morning. We are indeed very pleased to be here. We are excited that all of you are here and we are indeed ready to begin. I am Dr. Chong Soo Lee and I'm a senior lecturer with University Technology Petronas. We are located in Perak in Malaysia, and I'm also a committee member of the Malaysian English Language Teaching Association, more affectionately known as MELTA. Particularly, we belong to the MELTA Perak Chapter, and I am your host for today's session. I am very pleased to welcome you, all of you, to the session this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are presenting on the topic facilitating active participation through instructional strategies. For your information, we received more than 200 registrations from across Malaysia, Philippines, and Indonesia. So we are very excited to have all of you here with us this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, here are some ground rules that we hope that everyone will adhere to make sure that the session is able to run smoothly. First, kindly ensure that your camera and microphones are turned off throughout the duration of the webinar. Also, if you have any questions, particularly for the presenters during the presentation, please type them into the chat box. The moderator and the speakers will pick up the questions from there. Also, do bear in mind, we will not allow raising of hands during the presentation session, which means you have to refrain yourself from clicking on those tiny little hand buttons on the control panel. Ladies and gentlemen, for your information also, the session is recorded and the recording will be shared on MELTA's YouTube channel, MELTA's website, Facebook and Instagram at a later date. For those of you who do stay on until the end of the webinar, a feedback form will be given and we encourage you to please respond to the feedback form, and from there an e-certificate will be emailed to you within 14 working days via the emails. So without further ado, I would like to call upon Madam Chia Yet Tang, the chapter leader of MELTA Perak Chapter, to say a few words. Over to you, Madam Chia.
Thank you, Suli. A very good morning from Ipoh, Perak. On behalf of MELTA Perak Chapter, I would like to thank all of you for taking time to join us. It is so wonderful that all of you are able to spend your Saturday morning, your precious weekend, to be with us here in this webinar. Now, actually, this webinar is a sequel to the webinar that was organized by MELTA Malaysia and Oxford Fajar, Oxford University Press, in June, in which I myself moderated. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank our esteemed speakers once again, Ms. Buni Nathan and Ms. Sital Kaur, for sharing with us on the instructional strategies to facilitate active classroom participation. Now, these strategies will be very applicable to both primary, secondary school teachers, as well as teacher trainees from the teacher training college or the university where you have TESOL students. Now, Ms. Boni and Ms. Sital will be giving us precious tips on how these instructional strategies are linked to Bloom's revised taxonomy. They will be bringing us through on the link between instructional strategies starting from the lower level of Bloom's revised taxonomy to the highest level of creating. So stay tuned with us so that you will have a good picture on these instructional strategies. Now, a little more information about our speakers. Though both of them are from Melbourne, but they are living in different parts of town. And with the lockdown in Australia, they can only see one another virtually to plan for this sharing today. So a very big thank you to both of you from MELTA Perak Chapter. And before I leave you in the good hands of our moderator, Farini, I would also like to thank MELTA Malaysia, especially the president, Associate Professor Dr. Ramesh Nair for his continuous support to us in Perak Chapter, the Director of Chapter Bureau, Ms. Chandrakala Anapramparaman, for her guidance to Perak Chapter, and all other committees, for example, the Special Interest Group from MELTA Malaysia. And of course, not forgetting my committee members in MELTA Perak Chapter who have been working so hard behind the scene for the past weeks in realizing today's event. Thank you to all of you. So with that, I pass back to you, Suli.
Thank you very much, Madam Chia. Ladies and gentlemen, without delay, we will begin the session. This morning, our session will be moderated by Puan Farini Ahmad Fadil, who has had 19 years of teaching experience and is currently an English teacher in SMK Dato Abdul Rahman Yaakob in Perak, Malaysia. Over to you, Puan Farini.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chong. Okay, once again, a very good morning from Ipoh Perak, Malaysia, to our distinguished speakers from Australia, Miss Bonnie Nathan and Miss Sital Kaur. Welcome to both of you again. Okay, how are you this morning? Here it's morning in Malaysia. Okay. Thank you to all our viewers from all over Malaysia, as well as from Indonesia and the Philippines, who are watching today's webinar on the topic Facilitating Active Participation Through Instructional Strategies. Okay, English as an additional or second language. Students are learning a language in the language they are learning. This increases individual accountability and often leads to a lack of motivation and engagement in our classrooms. It is important to create an environment where all students have equity in their learning experiences to explore issues and ideas in depth from a variety of viewpoints. So this is taken from Center for Teaching and Learning, Washington University, 2009. Okay, everyone. Today's presentation offers insights on cooperative learning elements, the teaching of social skills, groupings, and international strategies educators can utilize to facilitate active participation across all subject areas. Now, let me introduce our speakers. Our first speaker is Miss Bonnie Nathan. Hi, Bonnie.
Hi.
Hi. So, Miss Bonnie has a Master of Applied Linguistics from Edith Cowan University, Australia, a Bachelor in Education TESOL with honours from University of Malaya, a Graduate Certificate in Education for International Baccalaureate IB from University of Melbourne. She is currently part of the school leadership team as the EAL, that is English as Additional Language, Learning Specialist and Curriculum Coordinator at a public school in Melbourne. Previously, she was a Deputy Principal and Teacher Consultant for Classroom Management and Student Engagement in Western Australia. Miss Bonnie has worked as an EAL teacher for 33 years across multiple settings in international schools, colleges, universities, including Malaysian and Australian public schools. Having this vast experience in teaching EAL, we are looking forward to learn from Miss Bonnie. Next, our second speaker is Miss Sital Kaur. Hi, Sital. Once again.
Hi, Farini.
Yes. Miss Sital has a Bachelor of Education in TESOL with honours from Canterbury Christchurch University, UK. Currently, she is part of the school leadership team as the Literacy Improvement Leader and Year-Level EAL Coordinator at a public school in Melbourne. Before leaving for Melbourne, Sital was a district-level master trainer and professional learning community PLC coach for the Batang Padang district in Perak. I'm surprised. I think the Batang Padang district teachers who are watching our webinar this morning are happy to see Sital online. Sital is also the recipient of the Perak State Education Department Gold Award. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So we welcome both of our speakers to our MELTA Perak Chapter International webinar. Once again, feel free to let us know your thoughts to the viewers, okay? If you have any question to ask our speakers, write them down in the chat box. I shall now pass the floor over to our first speaker this morning, Miss Bonnie. Over to you, Bonnie.
Thank you. Just going to share my, yep. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Right. So thank you for joining us today in our presentation. So we're going to be sharing some tips. We're going to be sharing some tips on how you can facilitate active participation. And through instructional strategies, we hope that there would be some valuable ideas and resources that you could take and use in your classroom from this. Hang on. Oh, sorry. I don't know what happened there. Can you see my screen? Sorry.
Yes, we could see probably. Yeah, perfect. That's much better.
All right. Okay, thank you. Sorry, something happened with the presenter view. All right, thank you. So we would like to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, traditional custodians of the land from which we are presenting today, and pay our respects to their elders past and present. So Farini has said a lot about us already. So you already know that I've been teaching for more than 30 years in all kinds of settings. I've been a teacher consultant where I used to run workshops for teachers from all over Western Australia. And we talked about, we ran workshops on behavior management and these instructional strategies. I'm currently a curriculum coordinator and an EAL learning specialist where I work.
So good morning, everyone. As Farini introduced, I'm Seetal Kaur and I've been teaching EAL for 7 years now. And in my current position, I am the literacy improvement leader and the year 10 level EAL leader. So year 10 is equivalent to Form 5 in Malaysia. Okay, so the purpose of this session is firstly to recheck our mindsets when we think about engagement in our classrooms. And then we are also going to revisit our existing knowledge about cooperative learning and bringing that back to our consciousness. And most importantly, we are going to reflect on how we can take some of these strategies and use them in our subject areas. So to recheck our mindsets, we have to first become consciously aware of engagement. And this is also an important point if we want to increase student participation. This may be done by changing our thinking about engagement. So it's not just about why aren't my students more engaged, but rather asking ourselves, how can I make my instructions more engaging? And this strongly relates to growth mindset, whereby we are constantly thinking and reflecting on our teaching styles. And we should also be mindful to not teach as we were taught, but rather use current and relevant research to inform our practices. And always remember that we teachers have control over what happens inside our classrooms. So before we move on, let's take a minute to reflect on this question. So what does student engagement mean to you? Well, you don't have to respond, but you can if you want to, because we will get you to reflect on this question again at the end of the session. So does student engagement mean, number one, students are quietly doing their work? Number two, is it a noisy classroom where students are engaged in guided conversation? Or is it number three, it involves group work? So we will come back to this question again at the end, just to see if your thinking has shifted. So you're thinking about student engagement and what it means to you.
So what does research say about student engagement? It promotes a host of desirable outcomes, including academic outcomes such as higher achievement and reduced dropout, as well as various well-being and life outcomes. It begins with the relationship between the teacher and the students, and then the teacher's level of content and pedagogical expertise, and the degree to which the students actually see the content as relevant to their current interests, future goals, and identities. So Marzano asks these 4 questions. How do I feel? How am I interested? Is this important? Can I do this? All these questions need to be in the positive. The student needs to say, I feel ready to learn. I am interested in what you're going to tell me. This is important to me. That means to my life outside school, and I can do this. If the student thinks that they can't do something, or they're not interested, or that it's not important to them, then the student engagement levels will actually drop. So basically what we want is to have this active participation. So where we are creating a balance between safety and accountability. So if your classroom is too safe, the lazy students will not engage because it's too easy. And if your lesson is too accountable, the struggling students will not engage. So what we want is for more students to be more engaged more of the time. And we will revisit this in a little more detail later. So before beginning to use instructional strategies in our classrooms, we need to bring back to our consciousness a few important things. So we need to know what cooperative learning elements are. We need to pre-teach social skills. We need to have differentiation. We need to be sure how to do that. And we need to have some group seating plans. So what is cooperative learning? This was sparked by the research of Johnson & Johnson in the 1980s. So it's basically a pedagogical process that allows active participation in your classroom. So active participation happens when, like what we said earlier, more students are more engaged more of the time. So cooperative learning also promotes collaboration, social skills, and higher levels of student engagement. Small group of learners work together to achieve higher levels of success in tasks. So it can be used for any year levels and in any subject areas. And it develops metacognitive skills and covers all layers of the Bloom's taxonomy. And it allows teachers to develop high impact teaching strategies. So there are 5 basic cooperative learning elements that were put out by Johnson & Johnson. So they are positive interdependence, individual and group accountability, promotive interaction or face-to-face interaction, conflict management through the appropriate use of social skills, and group processing. It is important to remember that not all of these can happen all the time. And we will revisit these when we look at some of the instructional strategies in detail soon. So the first one is safety and accountability. Safety and accountability are like 2 sides of a scale or a seesaw. If the task or activity is too safe, the less engaged students may not participate. So example, a question or task that is not challenging or has obvious answers. And if the task or activity is too accountable, the struggling students may not attempt it or just give up. So example is a task with unclear instructions and too difficult to complete. In order for active participation to happen, there needs to be this balance between the safety and accountability. So for example, the teacher allows students to discuss a question with their partner for 5 seconds, that's safety, before calling their names by randomly picking some pop-up sticks labeled with their names, so that's accountability. All cooperative learning strategies tick the safety and accountability boxes. So as soon as you do a cooperative learning strategy, you will tick these boxes, both accountability and safety. Sital?
Sorry, yes, because I mute my microphone, so I forgot to unmute. So let's now look at promotive interaction, which is also known as face-to-face. So this cooperative element involves student engagement and interaction with one another when completing a teacher-determined task. So it can be either in pairs or in groups, small groups. So this element may happen when students are teaching another member of the group on how to find a solution to a problem. This element may also happen when students are supporting the group members to understand the content of the lesson, or even when they are discussing new ideas orally in pairs or in groups. So from this, we can already see how this cooperative learning element allows maximum opportunities for encouragement, for support, for positive peer feedback, healthy debate and discussion, which then allows room for constructive criticism as well. And this element also indirectly increases the level of motivation amongst students. For example, when students are contributing ideas and sharing them with their peers, it is more likely to motivate the less active students to also be engaged. And this strategy can be further enhanced with predetermined individual roles such as writer, reader, timekeeper, presenter, etc.
So different tasks will incorporate different interdependencies. So according to Johnson and Johnson, there are 9 positive interdependencies in cooperative learning. So one is goal. So they have to establish a common goal. Then there is a role interdependence, like what Sital just said, giving each member of the group an assigned or which is interconnected and complementary. And then there is the like academic roles like reader, writer, or social roles like observer, noise monitor, energizer, etc. And then we use one set of resource shared materials for the group, such as an A3 paper or a set of materials. There sometimes could be incentives where the teacher may want to reward the winning team. There might be outside forces like teachers setting a time for work to be finished. The environment also, because the physical environment of your classroom or outside your classroom, the weather, all this affects you doing this thing. And then if there are long-term groups, they could establish a mutual identity like a name, a song, a flag, a logo. But it can also be done in one lesson. So if the teacher's running a quiz, for example, you can have students in groups with a name for themselves and see which group is winning. And then sometimes there's a sequence where every student has to do their work first before the other one can do. And sometimes we do role plays, and we do that through that simulation in the interdependency. It is important, very important, to remember that not all of this will happen in every cooperative learning task. Some will happen more often than the others, and some may only happen once or twice a term. So just keep that in mind. Sital?
Yep, can we move to the next slide?
I have moved.
Oh, unfortunately, it's still showing positive interdependence.
Now?
No, it's still showing positive interdependence.
I've put on group processing here.
Let's try going back to the previous slide and then
I have done that. Yep.
Yeah, not on our screens though. Oh, okay. So some participants can see group processing. So maybe it's just a problem from my end.
Just go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, yes. Now it's showing group processing. Sorry about that. So moving on, our next cooperative learning element, which is group processing. This is a reflective process that allows the groups to practice higher order thinking skills. So because they need to determine areas of improvement for current and also future learning. Therefore, during group processing, students will examine the relationship between their cooperative learning activity and their achievement as a group. They will review their group session to describe the members' actions that were helpful or unhelpful, to decide what actions to continue or to change. And this element happens more easily when teachers create long-term based groups. And this element can also be then linked to incentives, whereby there is a prize at the end of the term for the best performing group based on a point system. And to monitor student progress, teachers can simply create visible charts to show daily or weekly improvement.
All right. So thinking about social skills, students actually do not come to school with social skills. No matter what we think, they actually don't have them. These skills need to be taught explicitly. So they also teach students to work the social skills also teach students to work in a team with members that they may not personally like. So we are basically preparing students for jobs that may not exist. So we are training students to have that emotional intelligence to go out into the adult world. According to Johnson & Johnson, there is a list of social skills that contribute to effective cooperative learning. So they are turn taking. We actually need to teach students how to take turns when they are talking in a group. Respecting personal space, students need to understand the concept of personal space and that they should not be sitting or talking too close to a person. And then we talk about active listening. So students need to learn the behaviors of active listening, such as making eye contact, nodding, encouraging the speaker, etc. And then we talk to them about inside voices. So we teach students that inside voices is only as far as 30 centimeter to reduce noise in the classroom. So one way is by telling students that if I can hear you at the front of the class, that means you're not using inside voice. So it's also a form of behavior management strategy. And then we also need to teach them how to move safely in the classroom. Students need to be explicitly instructed in how to move around the classroom without banging into tables and chairs and also their friends. And we need to teach them how to disagree. So they need to be provided with scripts on how they can disagree with their group members. So for example, they can say, I hear what you are saying, but I think we can add more ideas to that. So instead of saying, that's a stupid idea, which our students may say. And also we need to teach them how to reach consensus. So you can create a few different actions like thumbs up, down, traffic lights, to reach consensus in a group. So you can create this in your classroom. So it is important to teach that the majority always wins, even if they are not correct. And you disagree with that decision because they are learning how to behave in a democratic setting.
Okay, so moving on, differentiation. So this instructional strategy more easily lend themselves to differentiation in a variety of cooperative learning settings, as they are not group work, but cooperative learning strategies that ensure more students are more engaged more of the time. So teachers, we can begin asking ourselves questions such as, how am I including my less able students? Or what roles are they given? So we have to remember that the focus is on slowly and deliberately building on student capabilities and confidence to get them to the point of self-efficacy. So for example, a student who is in the lower ability group could be given the role of a timekeeper or a manager. So this allows them to participate and contribute without too much stress, and it will slowly and indirectly build their confidence to work with others in a team. So differentiation in terms of instructions, activities, number of tasks, level, time, assistance provided can be offered to students. Just keep in mind that differentiation needs to happen throughout the lesson, not just during cooperative learning or during independent practice. It also needs to be planned from the lesson objective to the end product of the lesson. And this includes thinking and planning the materials, such as the books, the notes, resources, and also teacher-determined groups.
So now we look at grouping. So Bruce Tuckman talks about the stages that happens when we use long-term groups. So long-term means one whole term or one whole semester. So when you have long-term groups, four things happen. First, the groups are formed, so the forming happens. Then the storming happens. They begin to adjust to their group members. This also happens in our adult lives. So if you get a new principal in the school, storming may happen because you're beginning to readjust to the new group member. And then the norming will happen where they begin to actually function together. And then finally, they can perform. They begin to display optimal performance. Teachers can use the long-term groups as base groups, and then you can move students around for specific tasks known as task groups. So you can do that for, like using their ability and stuff, but you can have a long-term base groups. So there are three types of basic grouping. One is assigned by the teacher. You can do that mixed ability or same ability. You can just ask students to turn their chairs around to form a group, or you can randomly mix pre-assigned groups, or you can do a rotational system, or you can use same interest. And then the other one is where the students themselves choose their groups. So they can want to work with their friends, but you can add some exceptions, such as you need to work with a different person from before, or you can base that on a survey result, or they can pick options based on different set of tasks. And then finally there's these random groups, so like picking names from a hat, or grouping apps, or numbered heads, colored pop sticks, any of those things that you can use. So we're going to pause before we move on to the next section. We're going to just pause and see if there are some questions that we can address at this point. Ms. Faridi?
Hi. Yeah. We welcome, okay, we have one question from Puan Zulaika Begum.
Yeah.
How do we make students' engagement in rural setting, especially Aborigine students?
Yeah.
Sital Oboni?
Yeah. I think Sital has had experience working with Indigenous students. Do you want to address that, Sital?
Yes, I do. So I worked in SMKI Kuning before moving here to Melbourne. And I've got a few Aborigines community students as well. So I'll be also sharing some of the strategies that I use, but mostly is understanding that we have to create a safe environment for them. Like we mentioned earlier, safety and individual accountability. It's very, very important to make them to feel safe. So rather than, directly posing the question to them and expecting them to answer on the spot, it's very important to give them some thinking time so that they can process the question and understand what it really means. But with my kids, what I used to do with my students, there was a lot of group work. So very minimal individual work, but a lot of group work, because when they're put in groups, it somehow lifts the burden off their shoulders. It makes them feel that, okay, it's not about me. This answer that I'm going to share, it's not from my perspective, it's from our group's perspective. So it reduces the level of accountability, and they are more, I've seen that they're more happy to try, more happy to be engaged. So for me, group works really worked. And also the strategies that I'll be sharing, some of the strategies, so you can see how this might be able to work in your context. Well, it did in my context, so I'm really hoping that you can take some of these strategies back and implement in your setting.
Thanks, Sital. And Ms. Farini, are there any other very
we have
questions
another,
that we need to answer?
Yeah, we have another question from Mr. Ramesh.
Yeah.
Okay, what works better for active participation? Having students of similar proficiency level in a group, or having students of mixed ability in the same group? What is the practice with EAL students in Australia?
Right. So research shows, so if you look at Kagan's research, it actually shows that a mixed ability group has a higher level of participation, because it's sort of the peers help each other. But for your purposes, like I said before, you can have a base group throughout the term, and this base group could be of mixed ability. And then when you want to do a task, you can break them out into task groups, and then you could have similar abilities depending on the tasks that you're doing. And that's what we do here as well. We mix, and then we break them out for task groups. And in those task groups, sometimes we still mix them, sometimes we put them into ability groups just for that one particular task. So I hope that helps, answers your question.
Okay.
So we're going to move on. Is that all right, Ms. Farini?
We have another one.
Oh, okay.
Last one from Sheila.
Yeah.
Okay. Could either presenter comment on assessment and tracking of student progress? Perhaps more on assessment literacy as a way of continuous student engagement.
Okay. Okay, today we are just presenting instructional strategies, and we're actually not looking at assessment. That's a whole new different presentation. But what you can do is you can create rubrics for your instructional strategies. So you have rubrics, and then those rubrics can become your assessment document. So if you have, let's say for when we look at the instruction strategies, this will begin to make a bit more sense. So depending on what you're asking the students to do and what the end product that you expect, that end product can be linked to some rubrics that are clear and explicitly you have explicitly explained to the students, this is the end product that I want, and these are the rubrics. So if you meet these 3 rubrics, you're going to get this many marks, or each rubric carries a certain number of marks, and then you can link those rubrics to your instructional strategies, and then you can use those rubrics for your assessment documents. Hope that helps.
Can I also add on? So in the mainstream setting, high school, we do have, like what Bonnie mentioned, rubric to track students' progress. So it's called progress report, which is conducted on a fortnightly basis. So it is assessed based on students' engagement in class. That's one of the criteria. There's also homework and organization. There's also learning achievement. So we have this progress report rubric, which teachers will assess on a fortnightly basis, and it gives students like a form of it's a continuous form of assessment whereby they can track themselves how engaged they are, and it also is a great tool for the teacher to see who is well engaged or who has suddenly lacked engagement and what needs to be done. So it's on a scale 1 to 5. And that's what we do here to track student engagement. So it's done on a fortnightly basis.
Right, so now we'll move on to the instructional strategies part, because this is the part that you can actually take and use in your classroom now that you have all that knowledge of how to set this up, all the things that you have to look at before doing instructional strategies. So let's have a look. So we are going to be looking at 5 instructional strategies in detail. So we're going to look at what you can do step by step for them. So what is instructional strategies? So these are the strategies we use in our lessons to allow for that higher student engagement. They allow for cooperative and collaborative learning. They allow room for differentiation. They use many models to engage our students. So we're looking at Bloom's taxonomy as the core, and then we start with that lesson planning, and then we incorporate that gradual release model, that I do, we do, you do model, and then this ensures that we are providing equity and being inclusive, and then we can add various instructional strategies to this mix. And then we recognize that there are different types of learners, so we are encouraging them to be included in the lesson, and so we want that higher level of engagement by doing this. So now let's have a look at 5 instructional strategy examples and how we can use them in our classrooms.
Okay. So let's look at the first strategy, which is think, pair, share. So this is a 3-step collaborative learning strategy where students work together to solve a problem or answer a question. And this strategy requires students to firstly think independently about a topic or an answer to a question. And then number 2, they pair up and share ideas with another student. And number 3, share the ideas or discussion with the whole class. So you can see that there's a lot of implicit oral practice happening in this strategy. And it also encourages a high degree of student response as opposed to a teacher asking a question and one student responding to that question. And this is because they are now using we think rather than I think, as I mentioned earlier, because they're moving from high accountability of thinking by themselves to actually a safety element whereby they are presenting something they have shared with a friend. Therefore, they are more willing to take risks. And this strategy can be used to introduce a lesson as a hook, to activate prior knowledge, to develop understanding, or during guided practice, or even to review a topic. But if you have a large class, students can just turn their chairs around, or they can just speak to another pair during the sharing phase. So this is one of the strategies that I used very much when I was in Malaysia, and I've seen that it has improved in terms of student engagement. And now let's see the cooperative learning elements, the social skills, Bloom's taxonomy domains that are present in this learning activity. So cooperative learning elements that are part of this strategy are face-to-face interaction, which happens when students are talking in pairs or even when they're sharing to a larger group. Safety and individual accountability. So accountability happens when students have to think on their own. And safety element is when they are talking to their partners. Interpersonal and social skills. Positive interdependence, such as goal. So goal is to work, the goal of this activity is to work together to solve a problem or to answer the question. Outside force, which is the time factor, and environmental, so the space in the classroom. And the social skills to be pre-thought are turn-taking, insight voices, active listening, respecting personal space, moving safely in the classroom. So this is to ensure the success of the activity, so these social skills. And the Bloom's taxonomy categories that are explored here are remember and understand. Okay, so moving on, the next strategy is hot potato. So this is a fast-paced cooperative learning strategy that promotes the contribution of a range of different ideas. It pushes the students to keep digging deeper or to create ideas. So for this activity, so I'll just briefly take you through the process of the activity. So students will first form a circle, and then a preferably small soft object such as mini bean bag or tennis ball is passed around. When the timer goes off or when the music stops, the teacher will show a flashcard or PowerPoint image to the student holding the object. So teachers are to allow wait time of about 30 seconds. So this is the safety element. Rather than putting the student on the spot, we are giving them time to think. And then once the 30-second is up, the student holding the object will attempt to answer the question asked on the flashcard or the PowerPoint image. So this is now an accountability element. If the answer given is correct, he or she will continue to pass the object to the person next to them. And if the answer is incorrect or the student takes longer than the allocated time to answer, he or she will be out of the game and must sit outside. Well, students are allowed to say pass twice, after which they must leave the game. So just to make it a bit more, just to make sure that it's a bit more safe. And the last standing student is the winner. So this fun and interesting strategy can be used to introduce a lesson, to activate prior knowledge, to develop understanding during guided practice, or even to review a topic. So the elements that are present in this cooperative learning activity, the cooperative learning elements are safety and individual accountability, as I mentioned earlier. So safety is the part where we're giving them the think time, and individual accountability is when they have to respond to that question posed by the teacher. Interpersonal and social skills, positive interdependence, which covers incentives. So there is a winner at the end of the activity. Outside force, which is the think time, and environmental, the space that is used for this activity. So the social skills to be pre-thought are turn-taking. This is actually a very good turn-taking teaching and learning opportunity, because in this activity, only the student holding the object is allowed to speak. And then insight voices, active listening. So students have to really pay attention to the question posed by the teacher. Respecting personal space. So students are not allowed to throw the object. So we are teaching them to pass without hurting one another. And of course, moving safely in the classroom. So if these social skills have been pre-thought earlier or in any earlier strategies, activities, it helps to remind students to use them. And in terms of the Bloom's taxonomy categories, you can see that we are now beginning to move up to include the domain of apply.
Right, so before we move on, we're just going to pause a bit and see if there are any questions about these two strategies.
I have 4 questions for both of you. Okay.
Okay.
The first one is from Stacy David.
Yeah.
How do I manage when a group fails to cooperate mid-task? How do I intervene this without disrupting the lesson? That is the first question.
Okay.
Bonnie,
That's actually a really good question, because this is why we talked about all those things that we need to pre-teach before we actually put in this. You can't straight away go and do an instructional strategy without having some rules and class rules, or pre-teaching social skills, teaching them how to disagree politely, how to have that script. So if they don't agree, they need to have a script and say, I don't agree with you, but so that script is something they keep on practicing until they get there. So those things need to be put in place to prevent this. But in case you have put all that in place and still something is happening, then you need to go and sit with that group and start facilitating that activity to be there. You need to be present and you need to be part of that group, and you can start facilitating that. Hope that helps. Yeah.
Okay. Are you ready for the second question? Okay.
Yeah.
From Chia SN. If we have differentiation activities in our classroom activities, how about the mid-year and final exam? All pupils sit for the same exam and there is no differentiation in the examination.
That's a really very interesting question, because I think that is the education department's level to think about mid-year and end-of-year assessments. Yes, we do agree that we really encourage teachers to differentiate their lessons. This is because we really want to include the less able students. So we don't want to leave them aside. Okay, we know that our class has got various levels of students, various abilities. So we want to make sure that we also incorporate the less able students. So that's why it's important to differentiate. And in terms of mid-year and assessments, yes, it might not be in their favor, but through all these strategies that we're putting, through all the differentiation that we're doing in terms of our lessons, our tasks, it will somehow prepare them for the skills. So it's not all about assessment, I would say. It's also about preparing them for the long-term skills that they can use in real life.
Adding on to that, when you use your differentiation, basically the students who are not learning anything at all are now beginning to learn something. So when you come to those exams, even though they may not get the A's, but they will actually, what you will begin to see is that their marks are actually improving a little bit, because now they have a little bit more knowledge, because you have differentiated and you've made them understand what you're doing. So even though they may not all get the A, but you will see that they are actually beginning to move. So that's another reason why that differentiation helps these students. So that's really an important part of it as well, adding on to whatever Sital has just said now. That's another thing that you will begin to see.
Okay. Can we go on to the third question? Okay,
Yes.
it's from Michelle Fu. It's a question here, think pair share for assessment or for class discussion?
Oh, interesting. Okay, so well, I use it for class discussion, a lot for class discussion, because by now my students, when I say think pair share, they know exactly what I'm planning to do. But I think you can also use that for assessment. I've not tried that. I'm not sure if Bonnie has tried that for assessment.
Yes, I have.
Oh, yeah. So I let Bonnie respond to the assessment bit, but I use think pair share a lot for my classroom discussion, and it's actually very quick. It's a very quick. It's a very meaningful activity, and you can see that students will start generating. It will start generating their thinking before they even just at the start of the lesson. So they're really thinking about the topic, about the issue, and yes.
Yeah. So for we have an EAL continuum, which is our assessment document. And part of that assessment document are the 4 macro skills, one of it being speaking. So I do use Think, Pair, Share to tick off some of those assessments for speaking. So I use that when one is, some part of that assessment could be student is willing to take risks when they are speaking, or some part of it could be student is beginning to have to move on to more grammatically correct sentences. So those are just examples. So I do actually use that to do my speaking assessment. So this is really important. First and foremost, you need to have assessment rubrics. So if your assessment rubrics has a speaking part to it, you can pick 1 or 2 of those that you want to assess with this very quick activity that you want to do. So that's how I use it. Yeah.
Can I give you the last question?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, will the speakers have time to dwell on active participation strategies in lessons done online via teleconferencing apps?
Okay, so yes, I would strongly, we will try to cover a little bit, but at the end of the PowerPoint, at the end of the session, we also have something that we would like to share, which will answer that question more appropriately in terms of online teaching. But all these strategies that we are sharing with you can be done via any online teleconferencing, any online teaching platforms. And just so that you're aware, we have been in lockdown since the start of term 3, which is July. Okay, so since July, we have been in lockdown completely. So all lessons are online, and we do incorporate these lessons. We do have Think, Pair, Share. We do Hot Potato online. We do all these strategies online, and we will be sharing more about this.
Yeah. So we use those breakout room features in our online apps, and then we use some of these strategies in those breakout rooms. So like what Sital said, we will go into a bit of detail later, but that's basically how we do that. We use those breakout room features.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so moving on. Yeah, we'll move on. Okay,
Move on.
right. So the next strategy we're going to look at is called placement. So the way we do this placement is, first, we group students in small groups of 2 or 3 or a maximum of 4. So each group will have 1 A3 paper, and they need to divide up the space according to the number of students in the group. So if you have 4 students, you have 4 spaces, 5 students, 5 spaces, and so on. And this needs to be modeled by the teacher. So you can model that on your board. And then you write your question or topic on the board. You set an amount of time to put for the down their thoughts. So all students in the group are writing at the same time, and each student will write in their own section. So let students know that they can write in any direction, but only in their own spaces. So you can monitor this by letting students use different colored pens, or they can write their initials in that space. So this is silent activity. So students are not allowed to speak or discuss at this point, and spelling does not matter. So always say this. If you want EAL students to write and do not want to interrupt their thinking process, you say to them, spelling does not matter, so that they can get all the thoughts out, and then we can edit that later. So when the time is up for that, you give students another 5 minutes to discuss and come up with a consensus from all their ideas to write in the middle of the paper. So you need to adjust this time to the context or the difficulty of the question or the student level. So you may want to give 10 minutes depending on the students you have. They then share their consensus with the whole class. So the teacher can actually assign 2 different questions to different groups, or if you have 4 groups, you can actually have 4 different questions that are based on the same topic that they are learning, so that when the sharing happens, everybody is getting ideas from all those different sharing. So this one is a really good one to be using as a hook or an introduction to the lesson. You can activate prior knowledge from this, so you can revisit what you have learned before, or to help them develop understanding, or during guided practice, or to review a topic. So if you have a lot of students, again, just turn the chairs around and form groups of 4. So that's one. Looking at the elements that are present in this cooperative learning, of course, there's that face-to-face interaction. There's that safety, because when they present to the class is from the consensus. The individual accountability happens when they are asked to write on their own without talking, and then they have to just write whatever's coming to them. And then there are interpersonal and social skills. There's positive interdependence, because the goal is to come up with a consensus, and they are sharing the same resources. So again, we need to have pre-taught the turn-taking, that inside voice, the active listening, respecting the personal space, and how to disagree and how to reach consensus. So in terms of Bloom's categories, you can now see that the next domain, analyze, has been included into this activity.
Okay. So next, our next instructional strategy is Freya model. So this model is a graphical organizer used for word analysis and vocabulary building. So this four square model prompts students to think about, to describe the meaning of a word or a concept, to define the term, to describe its essential characteristics, to provide examples and non-examples of the word. So I'll just take you through how you can set this together. So for this activity, students will work either in pairs or small groups. So for example, if the vocabulary you're planning to introduce is mammals, you write that, students will write that in the center. And then point to the upper left-hand corner and explain to students that they will write the definition of the word in that section, and allow time for students to respond. So for probably about maybe 2 to 5 minutes, depending on the level of the students. So some of the expected responses could possibly be: mammals are warm-blooded animals that give birth to babies, mammals have fur, mammals feed their babies with milk, so on and so forth. And then move to the upper right corner and explain to students that in this corner, they will list the characteristics or qualities of the word given. So example would be warm-blooded, have hair, have fur, give birth, give milk to the babies, etc. And then in the examples section, explain to students that they are to list examples or provide synonyms. So because we are now we're referring to mammals, so we will be listing examples. So if you are introducing a vocabulary, then they can provide synonyms for that vocabulary. So in this context, examples of mammals would be dogs, cats, tigers. And finally, for the non-examples, explain that students are to list the non-examples, such as crocodiles, chickens, birds, ducks. So these are not related, they are not from the mammal family. And this strategy can also be used for more complex discussions, such as climate change. So, and if we see that, again, this model can be used to introduce a lesson, to activate prior knowledge, to develop students' understanding during guided practice, or even to review a topic. So you can use this strategy for any part of your lesson. And if you have a big class, students can just turn their chairs around if space is limited. If you have more able students, then they can, of course, work independently. And the cooperative learning elements that are present in this activity are face-to-face interaction. So face-to-face interaction happens when students are discussing what to write in the 4 sections. And then we have safety and individual accountability. So safety is the consensus. So after the discussion, what does the team come up with? And accountability is when students have to share their personal ideas, their individual ideas. Interpersonal and social skills, and positive interdependence, such as goal. So the goal of this strategy is to complete the task. Resource, whereby each group will be given a diagram each. Outside force, the time factor. Environmental, which is the classroom space. And the social skills to be pre-thought are turn-taking, insight voices, active listening, moving safely in the classroom, respecting personal space, how to disagree, and how to reach a consensus. And as you can see from the Bloom's taxonomic categories that are explored, the focus now is on higher order thinking skills. So we have also, we have now added evaluate. So students are remembering, they are understanding, applying, analyzing, and evaluating.
Right, we're going to pause for a bit before we go on to the last strategy and see if there are any questions about these two strategies.
A question from Puan Farida Hanum. The future in education is going online. Okay, how do we incorporate cooperative learning when we are teaching online? One, what will happen to their social interaction? Two.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, because like we said, we have to use some breakout room features. And when education starts moving, I think more of these sites will come up with more ideas where we can do this. And again, the social skills now we have to shift a little bit, because now we are teaching students how to be safe online, how to be socially able online, and we have to teach. So when I do my online classes, we actually have some class rules when we do a Google Classroom that everyone is sharing and typing at the same time. Or when I put them in breakout rooms, the class and we together came up with 3 or 4 rules. Things like showing respect for other people's opinion, things like giving everyone a turn, things like, so all these things we have actually put that in for their online learning. So I don't know.
Sorry.
Yes, yeah. Go, Sital.
I would just like to add on. So like what Bonnie mentioned, yes, we do use a lot of breakout rooms. And for such templates, such diagram that you see in placemat of the Freya model, you can simply create a table on either Google Docs or Google Sheets. And then you can share the link with these. And you can put them in groups. And like what Bonnie said, also the use of breakout rooms. So that is that's very effective when it comes to group activities. So put them in breakout rooms, and then as a teacher, you can maneuver from one room to the other to see how the discussion is happening. And you can also, you don't have to personally be in the group in the breakout room to see what's happening. You can simply look at the Google Docs or the Google Sheet and see how students are typing in their responses. So that's what we use for our lessons. So put them in breakout rooms and then give them the link to the Google Docs or the Google Sheets, and then we can see students working independently.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Any more questions?
Yeah, it's from Zarina Hashim.
Yeah.
It is possible to do differentiation by grouping students according to their levels, or have a mixed ability students in a group.
Yeah. So you can do differentiation in both. So when we are talking about differentiation, differentiation needs to happen from the learning objective of your lesson. So in your learning objective, you need to already decide what students are doing for different things or different things. So let's say the more able are going to answer 10 questions, the middle might only have to answer 7 questions, and the less able maybe only 5 questions. So when you do the task, when you do this instructional strategies, they can work together to get these ideas. So the less able students are also beginning to copy from the more able students. They're getting some ideas from them. And then when they go back at the end and work on their individual work, they will then have all these ideas they've taken to add on to that. So that's how you're differentiating when you do this. So when you do these tasks, basically all these tasks will happen in your lesson, but your end product will always be, when you plan your lesson, your end product might be an individual piece of writing or individual piece of project or something. So these ideas are actually helping these less able students, and that's where the differentiation is actually happening quite implicitly. You have anything to add to that, Sita?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So we can group them according to ability or mix them. So I do some of mixing with my senior students, year 11 students. So they are more senior. And what I do is I have identified the more able, the more advanced students. So I make them as the leaders, and they are the one who contribute and make the discussion, make sure that it's happening. And the less able students are given roles. So initially I mentioned assigning different roles. So we have the role of presenter, we have the timekeeper, the writer, the editor. So the less able students, I want them to also be part of the discussion and listen to what their friends are saying. But I know that they might have that fear of contributing because the more able students are maybe dominating or are maybe, higher achieving students. So I give them a simple role such as timekeeper. It might look trivial, but it's actually an important role to keep track, just to make sure that they are listening and also keeping track of the time. And when they go into their individual task, they have all that the knowledge that from the discussion, all the ideas. You can see that they are slowly applying that in their writing. So you can either mix them up or have groups according to abilities. And if you're mixing them up, then you can simply assign role just to make sure all students have they're actively participating in such discussions.
Okay, thank you. Can we move to the next question? I have 4
Oh,
questions.
another question. Okay, yeah. The last one. Okay.
Okay, then it's from Susan. Susan from Ipoh. Please suggest any games or strategies during this pandemic while social distancing. Thank you.
So are you asking about on-site or online? Is that on-site social distancing?
On site.
On
Yeah,
site.
it's on site because while socially distancing oneself.
Oh, okay, on site. So you will actually have to do some of these. I don't think you can use all the strategies when they are socially distanced, but you could use the things like hot potato, because you can actually sort of throw the ball to another student who's standing a bit far. I'm assuming that you could actually break up, like, for example, if you want to do placemat, you might actually ask students to have their own piece of paper, but they are in that group, but they're far from each other. And then they're going to talk and come to a consensus from their own pieces of paper. So you'll just have to be creative and maybe reuse these strategies in a social distance environment. You have anything to add to that, Sito?
And if, let's say, students have the luxury of a laptop, so if they have laptop in class, then you can, of course, while socially distancing students, get them to be on that similar page, so the Google Doc or Google Sheets. And although they are far away from one another, they are actively contributing on that online document. So that is if all students are equipped with a laptop.
Okay, thank you, both of you.
Okay, so moving on to the last strategy we're going to look at today. This one is called Inventors. So for this one, what you need to do is prepare a number of envelopes, and that number will tell you will be equal to the number of groups of students you want to have. So if you have 4 groups, you need to have 4 envelopes. So in each envelope, you put in a number of small objects, like a bit of blue tag, a bit of paper clip, a strand of wool, a pop stick, a rubber band, etc. And then you will stick some instructions on the label, and we will look at those example of instructions in a minute. And then when you have your groups of 3 or 4 students, each group will get 1 envelope. And then you need to go through the instructions and check for understanding through questions, make sure they understand the instructions. You set time for the students to begin and stop their inventions. They are allowed to discuss using home language or English as they work. It doesn't matter. So then they will present their inventions to the whole class when they are done. So this is a really good one. You can use it at the start. You can use it to introduce, to activate. Again, you can use it for develop understanding, that guided practice, or to review a topic. So if you have a big number of students, you use both inside and outside your classroom so that they're working in groups if it's possible, or again, you can just turn your chairs around. So let's look at the instructions that will be on the label. So the instructions will say there are a few different items or things in the envelope. You share them out in your group. Some students may have more than one. Your group has to use all the items. you can only touch your own item. Your group will invent or make a new product. You have 5 minutes to complete your task. When the time is up, you will present or explain your product to the whole group. So if you have this kind of set of instructions that they have been glued onto the envelope, make sure you go through these instructions. Make sure your students completely understand what they're expected to do. And this is actually quite an exciting one. They come up with some very amazing inventions, so to speak. So again, you have the elements of that face-to-face, that safety and individual accountability, because individually they are only touching what they are touching, and then accountability, and then safety is when they create that product together. They are making decisions as a group. The end product is the goal. The resources are what you've put in the envelope. The outside source is the time you've set. The environmental is your space. So again, they're turn taking, they're using inside voices, they're doing active listening, moving safely in the classroom, respecting personal space, how to disagree because they might have to reach a consensus. So this activity, as you can see, covers all of Bloom's domains because now they are creating as well. Right. So any questions about this one before we move on? Before we come to the end of our session, actually. So let's see if there are any questions.
Okay, one question from Madam Zulaika. Can you give a strategy for reading storybook lessons or literature lesson?
Reading storybook lessons, another strategy from what we've done today. So when you are reading, basically you have a reason why you're reading. Yeah, what is your end? So if you want to, for example, do a comprehension of something that you are reading, you can use any of these strategies to do that. Or for example, you want to build up what a book is like. There's a beginning, middle, and end again. So it's not just the reading aloud, but what is the purpose of your reading? So that purpose of your reading can be linked to any of these strategies. So when you want to do something with the reading, you can use these strategies.
Okay. Another question from Mr. Ramesh. This is his second question.
Yeah.
Should assessments determine classroom activities? 1. If we focus on helping students become proficient, shouldn't the assessment take care of itself? After all, the assessment of the students' proficiency.
Okay. So when we're talking about assessments, our assessment in Australia is quite different from assessment in Malaysia. So you have to see what is it that the assessment wants, what is it that you are looking for. So basically these strategies are just to involve more students more of the time. So, and then you are going towards that end product. So we will talk about how these strategies are not something you're using all the time, but if you're looking at assessment, then you need to say, okay, if this is the what I want my students to reach, how can I get more students to reach there? How can I use one of these strategies to get more students to understand this? Like we've said, we can use some of these strategies to review. We can use some of these strategies to activate prior knowledge. We can use some of these strategies during guided practice. So where do you want to use them to get that optimum result that you want? Sital, do you want to add to that?
So I'm just going to break the term assessment to formative and summative assessment. So like based on I'm just sharing my current experience because we've been teaching online remotely from the start of the term. So what we have been doing is, so for formative assessments, in terms of ongoing assessments, just to build up the skills so that they're prepared for summative assessment, we do a lot of classroom group work tasks, and we call them hurdle tasks. So these little mini tasks, which are the formative assessment tasks, just so that students are doing it with their friends. So it's group tasks, group related activities, and yes, we do check them, we do mark, and we give them grades, but then that is to prepare them for the end. So if they are able to do these little tasks which we call hurdle task. At the end of the let's say the semester, when they are to sit for the semester test, the end of year or mid-year examination, they can then bring all those skills that they have been tested upon, put them together and use them for their final assessment. So that's a method that we have now shifted from solely individual form of formative assessments. So we have been employing a lot of group tasks, and we have used one of these strategies as well as hurdle tasks, a lot of group work, and just so that they are developing their skills. Yeah.
Okay. The last question from Ong Soon Lin. Can you share some examples of activities related to inventors? Sorry.
I don't know if I really understand the question, but I'm going to go back to the inventors. So this inventors is something that you can use in any of your lessons. So for example, if you want to use for a speaking assessment, this one is a good one because they actually have to present. Or if you want to use it for how they are working together in a group, or you can use that. So these are the, when I use inventors, I might use it in my reading. I might use it in even for writing, because at the end they may have to write the process out, or they may have to write out the instructions for their for what they have invented. So it depends on what I'm doing. So it depends on the genre that I want. So sometimes I use it if I want students to write instructions. They do this and then they write down the instructions of how they invented what they did. And then sometimes we can use it for another genre, depending on the genre that you're doing. So you need the things that you put inside also could affect that writing when you want that to happen. Okay.
Done.
Right. So we're going to move on. Right. So what we have done today is we have rechecked our mindset to see that it ensures reflective practices, because our reflective practices will have a domino effect in our classrooms. And then we are thinking we are all actually already doing many, many amazing things in our classrooms, but we may be doing them automatically. So it is rewarding for us to revisit and bring that back to our consciousness, like from these questions and all. I can see people are already doing some amazing things. So now you can be more conscious of what you're actually doing in your classrooms. And then we can reflect. Trial and error is the key to adding on to our existing repertoire. Have a go and be ready to share your best practices with your colleagues and your peers.
Okay, so yeah, I'm so sorry. The slides are all not working on my screen. It is still showing summary, but that's fine. I think I should be working on your end. So
yeah, you want me to go for this one? Student all right.
Okay.
So we looked at this question at the start of the presentation. So thinking and reflecting whether your response has changed. What does student engagement mean to you? Whether students are doing their work quietly, whether it's a noisy classroom as students are engaged in guided conversation, or whether it's just simply group work. Feel free to type your reflection, your thoughts onto your chat, and then we'll see if we have time to look at some of your thoughts.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if, let's say, your mindset has shifted. Like when I introduced the question, maybe you had a different response to it. And now after looking at the strategies, you might think, oh, probably it's not that. Now student engagement means this. So it'll be interesting to see if, any of your thoughts have shifted. So yes, please feel free to type in your responses, and we will definitely get back to that at the end of the session, if time allows us. Okay, so sorry. Instructional strategies. It can be used in any subject area. And as we mentioned earlier, they get more students more engaged more of the time. And instructional strategies also create a balance between safety and accountability. Instructional strategies, they allow easy differentiation possibilities. And as you can see from the 5 strategies that we have shared, they can be embedded in many parts of the gradual release model. So anywhere in your lesson, you can simply embed one of these strategies. Just a few points to remember. We don't need to do instructional strategies every day in every lesson. No, that's not how it works. So we keep repeating one strategy until our students and ourselves are very familiar with it, and only then we move on to another strategy. For example, one strategy can be used over 5 weeks in different areas of the lesson, as we have suggested. And conscious planning and preparation are the keys to successfully using and implementing strategies, instructional strategies in our classrooms. Remember to reflect and share best practices with your colleagues, and be kind to yourself if it doesn't go as planned. So practice makes progress. So keep trying until both you and your students are comfortable before moving on to the next strategy.
Right. Now, what Sital and I have done is we are basically working on creating a book for teachers we are working on 50 strategies. But here we have collated 10 strategies, 5 of what you've looked at and 5 additional strategies. And we valued it at a very low value of $2 Australian per strategy. So that's like 20 Aussie dollars, which is about 60 ringgit. But what we have decided for the participants today is to give like a 70% discount. So it is like only 18 ringgit. So we've got a purchase form that Sita will put in the chat in a minute. So what you will get is 10 instructional strategies, procedures for each strategy, information presented in this PowerPoint, the Bloom's domain, the cooperative learning elements, and there's additional information on when to use links to the lesson plans, like tips for larger classrooms, how to use for online and remote learning. And I think, Sital, you have put that in the chat box now?
Yes, I have. I've shared
Yes.
the Google form and the email address.
So you can use either one if you're interested in purchasing the booklet. Have a look and see. And if you want that. So inside, what it will look like is like this. So for example, the inventors, you will have the procedure. Then the next page has the cooperative learning elements, the additional information, how to use for online, even the labels we've added as appendix and such. So this is what each one will look like. You'll have 2 to 3 pages for each strategy, very, very detailed and step-by-step procedures. So it goes, and there's also appendix to help you. So have a look and see if you're interested. And then before we end, any final questions?
So, sorry, there's just a question there about shipping costs as well. We will be sending this as a PDF document.
Okay, thank you. Some thoughts and views from the viewers. Cooperative learning is beneficial for shy or less able students, as they feel less vulnerable when presenting views and ideas, from Puan Farida.
Yep.
According to Zarina, pupils' active participation in their own group as well as their interaction with other groups.
Yeah.
Okay. From Shamini, would love to have the slides for reference. Thank you for the sharing. Okay. I agree with Stacey David. Appreciate it very much. Good enlightenment on cooperative learning. I will look forward to use it.
Thank you.
All right. Okay.
So I think a few people have asked about whether we will be sharing the slides. The answer is no, because this has taken us maybe a whole term to get here working online. So we are not sharing the slides, but if they want the strategies, they can just get the booklet if they want. Yeah. Okay. So the strategies are very, very detailed in the booklets, but we will not be sharing the slides. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So no other questions, no further questions, I'm assuming. Yeah.
Okay. So we can end this session. Okay. Thank you to all who have written in your views and shared your thoughts. I'm sure that we have gained a lot of ideas from our speakers today. Thank you so much. On facilitating active class participation, Once again, thank you again to our speakers, Miss Boni and Miss Sital Kaur, for your invaluable sharing. A very big thank you to all the viewers today who joined us. Okay, I want to especially thank MELTA Perak Chapters for this opportunity to moderate today's session. As a reminder to all participants, please do a feedback on today's session. You can scan the QR code or you can also click the link in the chat box. Okay. I shall now pass the time to Madam Chia, okay, for the closing remarks.
Sorry, Farini, just before you do that, I just want, because there were a lot of questions about assessments, can I just quickly address that before we go? Because I think there's too much focus on exams and assessments. That's not what teaching is for. So I think if we focus on creating best practices in the classroom, the assessments will just take care of themselves in some point. So maybe not worry too much about the exams and the assessments, but more on students actually participating in the classroom and learning. That's what this is about. More students to be more engaged more of the time. And then at the other point, the assessment will start taking care of themselves. Just a last remark to address that a lot of assessment questions.
Thank you so much, Boni. Okay, I shall now pass the time to Madam Chia. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you, Farini.
Thank you.
Once again, a very big thank you to Boni and Sital for taking time to share with us in today's webinar. And thank you to MELTA Malaysia for your continuous support. And of course, we cannot hold this webinar without the participants. So from MELTA Perak Chapter, thank you very much for joining us in today's webinar. And our hope is that the shared strategies are helpful in your classroom students' participation. So thank you, Boni and Sital, for consciously alerting us on how these instructional strategies link with other elements such as the cooperative learning elements, social skills, as well as Bloom's revised taxonomy. And I would also want to take this opportunity to encourage all of you who have not joined MELTA to visit the MELTA website and register as a member of the Malaysian English Language Teaching Association. And last but not least, for us who are in Perak, do look out for MELTA Perak Chapter 2021 event. Once the lockdown is lifted, we are planning to have face-to-face activities for teachers, and one of the events that we plan will be the Untold Secrets of Bibliotherapy. So do join us then. So perhaps just for Zulaika Begum, who asked for a strategy for reading storybook or literature lesson, that's where you will get an answer. All right. So with that, thank you, everyone, and goodbye from MELTA Perak Chapter. I pass the time over to Suli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, thank you, everyone. Just a reminder to please scan this QR code that you see on the screen and provide your feedback to us. And again, your certificates will be emailed to you within 14 or after 14 working days. Yeah. So before we all go, we would like to request if anyone is ready or available, do please turn on your videos, and we would like to take a quick screenshot of everyone who is here this morning. Joanna, do you mind to remove the slide, and we can get screenshots of as many people as possible. It's good to see faces to names.
Hi.
Do we have more?
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Evelyn.
But just as our students are shy, I think our participants are also
Evelyn,
shy.
can turn on your camera. Yes, now I see you. Shalwati. Okay.
What about Michelle Fu?
Yeah, Nolia.
So not getting as many anymore. All right, so let me just prepare. Okay. All right, everyone, smile. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, take care, all the best, and stay safe from MELTA Perak Chapter. Bye-bye.
See you.
See you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.